The topic of Module 8 is the anatomy and physiology of the reproductive system. The reproductive system is an unusual system compared to the others that we've studied because when we are born, the system is not yet mature, and part of this is because the hypothalamus is not yet matured. And we see that it is the hypothalamus that secretes a hormone called gonadotropin-releasing hormone. And it's this hormone that stimulates the anterior pituitary to secrete two hormones, follicle-stimulating hormone as well as luteinizing hormone. And both follicle-stimulating and luteinizing hormone stimulate the ovaries and the testes to begin their maturation. Once the ovaries or the testes begin functioning as mature structures, they begin producing cells that are referred to as the gametes. For the ovaries, these are the eggs, which are referred to as ova, and for the testes, these are the sperm cells. Copulation or sexual intercourse will introduce the sperm to the egg, and this is necessary because an egg or a sperm cell only has a single copy of each of the human chromosomes. When the two are united during fertilization, the resulting cell now has two copies of each of the human chromosomes, and the cell can then begin developing into a fetus. So as mentioned earlier, fertilization combines the genetic information of the egg and the sperm so that the resulting cell, which is called a zygote, then has the full complement of human chromosomes and can begin developing further. Each of the eggs and sperm only has a single copy and therefore in itself cannot develop into a fully functioning human. Gestation refers to the fetal development stage that occurs within the uterus, where a structure called the placenta develops in order to facilitate the exchange of nutrients, oxygen, and waste between the maternal and fetal blood supplies. And finally, parturition is the term that's used for childbirth. Let's examine some of the structures of the reproductive system. And we'll begin with what are referred to as the primary sex organs. The primary sex organs are referred to as the gonads. In females, the gonads are the ovaries, and in males, the gonads are the testes. During fetal development, the ovaries and the testes actually develop from the same mass of cells, and only become either the ovaries or the testes when hormones like estrogen or testosterone signal them to become either of those structures. Once matured, the gonads will then function to produce the gametes, which in females are called ova and in males are called sperm. The gonads also function in producing and secreting the typical adult levels of steroid sex hormones into the bloodstream. So for females, this would be estrogens, for example, estradiol, and for males, this hormone would be testosterone. Recall that the ovaries and the testes are controlled by two hormones from the anterior pituitary. The first is luteinizing hormone, which is abbreviated LH, and luteinizing hormone stimulates the ovaries of the testes to produce and secrete their steroid hormones. Meanwhile, the second one, which is called follicle-stimulating hormone, which is abbreviated FSH, will stimulate the maturation of cell clusters called the follicles in the ovaries or the testes. And it's those follicle clusters that produce and ovulate the ova or produce the sperm cells. So ultimately, it is the hypothalamus that controls the anterior pituitary through the use of the hormone called gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH. And it's this hormone that stimulates the anterior pituitary to release those two hormones that we mentioned previously. Puberty is defined as the time in which the reproductive organs grow to adult size as well as adult functionality. Prior to puberty, the gonads don't release many of their steroid sex hormones into the bloodstream, and these low levels of hormone actually inhibit the hypothalamus from releasing its gonadotropin-releasing hormone. At the age of puberty, or as the age of puberty approaches, the hypothalamus begins to mature and becomes less sensitive to these low levels of circulating sex hormones. It will then start to increase its secretion of gonadotropin-releasing hormone, which is going to stimulate the anterior pituitary to then increase its release of luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone. And it's those two hormones that ultimately result in the gonads beginning to mature. Follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone are both protein-based hormones that come from the anterior pituitary. They both target the gonads, that is the ovaries in females and the testes in males. And follicle-stimulating hormone will stimulate the maturation of the cell clusters called the follicles that are in the ovaries and the testes. And it's those follicles that are responsible for producing and ovulating mature ova, as well as producing sperm. Luteinizing hormone, on the other hand, stimulates the endocrine cells of the ovaries or the testes to produce their steroid sex hormones and then secrete them into the bloodstream. In the ovaries, this hormone is primarily estradiol, which is a estrogen hormone in a family of estrogen hormones. Estradiol is the prominent of the estrogens that's produced by the ovaries. And in the testes, the primary steroid sex hormone is testosterone.